After his first major film role in Taps, audiences and critics called Sean Penn the best actor of his generation. An unforgettable role as surfer Jeff Spicoli in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and memorable roles in movies like Bad Boys, A Falcon and the Snowman, At Close Range, Casualties of War, and Colors solidified his status. His directorial debut was The Indian Runner. The Crossing Guard, his second directorial effort, opens November 15th and stars Jack Nicholson and Angelica Houston. And I am pleased to have Sean Penn on this broadcast this evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. Tell me about this. Where did the idea for the Crossing Guard come from?
Well,
that you wrote it.
Yeah, it came hard because it became very aware after The Indian Runner how important it was to find something that was going to maintain my interest for that new long period of time, because it wasn't like acting where you're in for a few months and you're out. And you want to be as interested at the end of the process as you are at the beginning. So I held off for a long time because I didn't want, once I started on a typewriter, I don't want to stop. And then I was a new father, and I guess I was starting to get to that stage where the joys were intact, but all of a sudden there were those nightmares that come along with that sort of newfound vulnerability. And
what are the nightmares?
Losses, and possibly you've got a new Achilles heel in life.
Yeah. I mean, a sense of responsibility.
Well, you got to keep this person alive.
Yeah.
And then Eric Clapton's kid went out the window, and that just, because, I guess because when it's someone like that, however it is our minds work now, it's become so identifiable. And it really, I thought, how do you possibly deal with that kind of loss? And so I started to try to write into that idea.
The loss of a child and the responsibility.
Mm.
And how did you come to the storyline that you have, which is a story of a young man who kills in an automobile another man's young daughter, goes to prison, and then the father and the mother both bereave, but at the same time dealing with that anger and that loss in different ways?
Mm-hmm. You know? Well, as quickly as I started writing, I realized that while the motivating idea had to do with the loss, I didn't want to write about loss, really. I wanted to write about the way that I imagined that first wave of feeling coming to you, sort of paralysis, when you cling on to something that maybe prevent you from facing loss, because facing loss is an unknown, and it's sort of like stepping into a dark cave. And I thought, well, let me start where I'd start. Let me start with hanging on to something tangible like rage, or something like guilt, which I always sort of perceive as fictions, that we pad ourselves from whatever nonfiction is unknown to us, like reconciliation of these kinds of ideas. And so Jack Nicholson's character is very much represented by a kind of marriage to rage, and I think David Morse's character is very much about that guilt and the way that they're both paralyzed for that period of time before they come into contact. So I wanted to just let it see what happened if I took that motor between the loss to those things, and just make a slice of life. Just see what happens in each of these people's days, and let it kind of take its own course.
As rage and guilt sort of go along parallel tracks and intersect.
Right.
And climactically in the end. Did you think of Nicholson and David Morse as on the one hand, Nicholson as the father and David Morse as the young man who went to prison for manslaughter because of the accident? Did you think of them as characters when you were writing the characters?
David Morse, yes. I'd worked with him before in The Indian Runner.
Right.
And he's a guy who's got a great sort of dignity that I think is the kind of dignity that's rare in a man, and particularly rare in an actor. And so there's something about that makes putting him in these kind of circumstances particularly moving to me. And Jack came after I finished the script, and it became once I got lucky enough to get it, because it was really just fate, because I ran into him. I'd known him socially, and I said, would you take a look at something? And he read it and said, I'll do it.
He read it one time and called you up and said, I'll do it?
He was very fast. He's very fast. He knows what he wants to do.
Yeah, he operates by instinct, I guess.
Yeah.
Did he tell you why he liked it?
Yeah, I mean, we've had those I get, yeah, but he uses, you know, at one time, he's the kind of guy who said, Jack, you're talking in the absurdities, aren't you? so I can't tell you why.
I tell you what he said. I mean, I know you've heard this, but I read somewhere that he talked about some sense of it gave an actor room to roam, that this, the way you had written it and the nature of the character gave him a chance to
Yeah, well, I think
breathe.
Most of the movies now, I always break down movies in America as the battle between the impressive and the expressive, and the impressive's winning right now.
Yeah. Is it hard to get the expressive on?
Very, very difficult. But I think that it's a kind of movie that's not as so dependent on the actors really taking the director's job. They don't have to tell you the story. They just have to live and breathe in it. And I think he recognized that. And I know he recognized that because he came to work and did that.
Did you tell him you were thinking about Angelica for Mary, his wife?
Well, we had many conversations about who would play that part for a long time. And what really happens is that it becomes a very short list when you think in terms of having someone who can carry a scene with Jack Nicholson and is also a great actress and is within the right sort of age range of what you're looking for. It becomes a short list.
It's Angelica and Merle and 2 or 3 others, and that's about it.
Certain people he'd been partnered up in movies with, so you don't want to repeat too much, that kind of thing. So,
was it his idea or your idea?
It was not his idea. It was my idea.
Did you have to sell him on it?
No, neither one of them. They
both were ready to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, saying that somehow their relationship was such that they could approach this.
I had not really known much about their relationship, so I'd known they'd been together, so I just asked them each, and they said they were fine with it. I didn't get into that.
It adds. I can understand why you wouldn't. It adds something to the attraction of the movie. I mean, in a sense, these 2 people together, both because of their abilities as actors, but also because they were together and then split, and here they are playing characters who were together and split.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard for me to view it that way, but I'm sure that's true.
Yeah. And then you were also directing as JoJo, not the person you were with.
Well, not by that time, not anymore.
Was that difficult for you?
Very difficult, yeah. But she's really, in all cases, very effortless actors from a director's point of view. So getting the work accomplished wasn't difficult.
Yeah. Difficult simply because you've got an emotional involvement with the person, and you've got to.
Just because it is.
Yeah. You like directing because what?
Well, for me, directing, writing, and editing is all sort of one job. It's one process, because I haven't really been a writer outside of film. And when I write for myself to direct. So I start as a director then, and everything I loved about acting, or what I love about acting, I find I have in the writing part of it. The difference for me is that it's on your own hours. If you need to be fueled up to give away some of that fuel, then you're picking your times. If you down there at that line where your own life and your heart and your soul, your spirit, or whatever, it needs whatever fuel you've got, and you're diminished on fuel, and then you got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, put on makeup, and somebody says do it, and you're tearing yourself apart based on that, then you're giving up blood you can't afford to. So I like the idea that whatever part of it is tearing yourself apart in writing and directing is on your own hours. And then when you come to the shooting of a movie, you're more of a boxing promoter, and somebody else is going to take the pain.
More of a boxing promoter?
Yeah, directing is about preparation and casting more than anything else, I think. And if you cast well, you don't have to whisper very many magic words in the actor's ear, especially a cast like this.
And mainly your role is to do what after you've cast them?
To see that your preparation is carried out.
Preparation as?
Well, in terms of what you've set yourself up to do to cover the heart of the story, because that's where I feel most complete as a director, is that I know the hearts of the stories I do. I wrote them. Yeah. And so and especially in a character-driven piece like this, as far as camera placements and things like that, you tend to know once you see a rehearsal where you'd want to be in that room to hear those words. And that's where you put the camera. And so the rest of it is about picking the rooms, picking the actors, being involved in the
and what role? Barry Sonnenfeld was here the other day, who is a former cinematographer. now directing. And you had one of the best cinematographers working for you in this. What role does he play?
Well, this is unresolved territory for me because I don't want to talk to cameramen about lenses and camera movement.
Yeah,
I tend to know what I want in this area anyway. And Vilmar Zsigmond, as a painter in light, to use this sort of highfalutin term, is an artist.
Yeah.
I think a great cinematographer. I don't like the term cameraman because I don't want him to touch the camera. I want him to just light the scene. So I have my ins and outs with the cameraman.
How about the music here? I mean, how do you get Bruce Springsteen to write a song that sort of infuses the opening of your movie?
With good fortune was the answer.
You call him up and you say, take a look at this?
Well, he'd been, as Jack Nicholson was on this last movie, Bruce Springsteen had been sort of the angel on my shoulder in the first movie and had let me make a movie inspired by one of his songs. And so...
Indian Runner was inspired by Springsteen's song.
Right. And I wanted, and I had come to very much respect his sensibility in regard to film. And so I asked him to come and see an early cut when I was still forming the movie, just to hear his thoughts on it. And he happened to be in the studio at the time, and I said, well, if something strikes you, and something struck him. So.
It's called Missing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look. Set this up for me. This is the scene, Do You Remember?
Do you remember? Oh, yeah, this is Jack and Angelica in the diner.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is after this very strained relationship of the past 6 years after the death of their daughter. For the very first time that he's actually looking to open himself up to her, and she stops him.
Roll tape. Here it is. You don't have to direct people like that. Just let it go. Robbie Robertson is in this. Mm-hmm. You like singers, songwriters?
I do, yeah. Yeah. Particularly, my favorite kind of music is one person alone with a guitar, singing good words.
Yeah. Do you play?
No.
You don't?
No, I chip away sometimes. I became a Phil Oakes fan early on, so I tried to learn some of his songs. But I have a brother who's a musician, so he I couldn't get the guitar out of his hand.
I'm going to show another scene because we want to talk about a lot of things. This is The Perfect Seven. Set that up for me.
This is just, I was sitting at the typewriter, miserable, and I just said, Sean, make Sean laugh.
All right. Is that enough?
I guess so.
All right, roll tape. Here it is. Make Sean laugh. Now, several things need to be said about that. It does make you laugh. Secondly, that's Eileen Ryan, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Who happens to be
my mother.
Your mother. Now, how is it directing your mother?
Well, she comes in with an awful lot of ideas. But my memory of that day is when she came in, she said, Jack, I just want to tell you, I've sterilized my hands thoroughly.
So
he says, that's great, Ma, you're on your own with my mouth.
And so, how many takes to shoot that scene? I mean, you have to do a number of takes anyway, just for angles, right? To give you some protection in the editing room.
Yeah, and then she had come in with a certain rhythm that I was not familiar with.
You weren't familiar with her rhythm?
No, she had a whole character together, and I liked it. And so it led to a couple of lines and things that weren't written. Yeah. So it was a fun day.
Yeah. Now, this is also part of where he is sort of, I mean, he's out of control, in a sense. I mean, the people will watch that scene and say, that's a pure Nicholson scene. Yes?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
You ever want to put yourself in these films? I mean, can you imagine?
No, really, I mean, I guess I could make a blanket statement, which is I don't enjoy acting. So I think that, the way I kid myself about it is like if I've already got a job if I'm directing, so why do it? And also, it would be very hard for me with this, so far, the sort of things that have interested me enough to write about are the kinds of things that where the actors really need somebody on the outside.
Yeah, right.
And, so I don't think I'd be doing anybody a service doing that.
It would detract from your directing of this kind of film, the kind of films you want to make.
I think so.
What turned you against acting?
I think it was what we talked about with writing. Is it really? There were a lot of factors involved at the time where I went sour on it. But primarily it's got to do with being able to pick your material because you wrote it, And then directed is one process. To be out there as an actor for hire, looking for things, the likelihood of coming across something that's going to be sort of harmonious with whatever it is that's part of your own search at that time, whatever you're trying to figure out, whatever your obstacles are at that time, and not take your mind off it, but actually enhance that bit of your journey. You can do writing and directing, whereas with acting you tend to go off of things experiential or observational, your own life, and then put them in a holding pattern and apply them to this piece, this idea. And so you come out a few months later and you've been in a bubble. And I tend to come out of those bubbles and everything else in my life is falling apart. So this process...
What do you mean everything else in your life falling apart?
Well, I've neglected every other thought.
Yeah.
And anything, no, I haven't let anything else in. Yeah. And whereas with this, it's a continuing process where you get on with your life while you're working.
Yeah. Do you think of acting as craft?
I think of it at its best as an instinctual craft. It is a craft. Certainly film acting is a craft. Yeah. But for me, the process was maybe a little too personal. And I think for that reason, you know, you tend to reach out to things that are a little less immediately accessible in terms of characters, or things that have a mask attached to them, because it's freeing. But it's only freeing within that craft and within that process. It's no more freeing in terms of growth of any kind, I don't think.
Yeah. Do you have any sense that you're turning your back on a, you know, I mean, you were considered pretty good. You're turning your back on talent?
No, I don't feel that way. I mean, I'm not going to accuse myself of how good I was.
No, I know, but you don't have to deal with that. But I mean, other people thought you were good and thought you had, you know, I mean, you remember the kinds of notices you got when you...
Well, Tennessee Williams isn't writing anymore. And so,
Tennessee Williams is dead.
Yeah, but anything to follow is pretty well dead, too. I mean, there's very few writers, real writers in movies now, or period.
In other words, there's no material out there?
There's not a lot to serve as an actor. There's not a lot to serve that'll serve you back, certainly.
Why is that? I mean, there are people that...
Well, the cliche is that people don't read anymore, and so their minds aren't inspired to write well and all that. I don't think that's the case. I think it's much more a case of that whole societal thing. There's less to write about that's celebratory. I mean, I always think in terms of a movie like Easy Rider. Yeah. And in its time, there was the poetry of freedom that people were going to respond to, that sort of youth group. And now you listen to music like something like Nirvana or something like that, where the talent and the truth of it is as intact as the spirit of a movie like Easy Rider, but recognizing that the poetry now is a poetry of rage, and that is also truthful, and it's disturbing. And so the tendency is to write about things that don't really exist. And you get these sort of exercises in the familiar all the time because people don't want to sit down and say, okay, by and large people are not happy. And so why is that? Let's figure out what we can say about that in movies or in literature and all that sort of thing. They don't want to make that investment. And so you don't tend to be reading things that touch your life, that have any relationship to what you or people you know are going through. And so you feel sort of silly as an actor in the things that they tend to do.
You dedicated Indian Runner to Cassavetes.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of dedicate this to Bukowski, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about both of them.
Well, I got to know John Cassavetes at the end, towards the end of his life. Yeah. And he was just this very...
Before he was sick, but while he was still directing.
He had gotten sick, but he was looking to direct another film, and it was on that basis that we'd met. And it was, and so we talked about making the movie together. And then he was not. He felt he couldn't stay, up enough hours of each day.
Didn't have enough energy to do it.
Yeah, but the hours he was up, there was a great, he always had that magic look in his eye, and he just
magic look.
Yeah, and he had said something about movies one time. He says, "I love making movies, good movie, bad movie, it doesn't matter. But if you don't put some thoughts into it, you miss the boat." And I always liked that idea. But then at the same time, he said, "Well, where should we shoot this movie, John?" He says, "Well, what town's got the best restaurants?" There was that kind of spirit about it.
Yeah. How about Bukowski?
He I'd become very close with over the last 10 years. And
is Barfly really him?
Oh, yeah.
It is.
Yeah, and but Mickey Rourke's character was a good 30 years younger than he was before he got published. He was, I guess, about 50, something, 30 years, but he was about 50 when he was first published, and this was one of the things about him. He was one of those people who'd been exposed to everything that would create a cynic, and was really still pure of heart, still hopeful. He lied about it well, you know, one-on-one, but not in his work, I think. And there's something very moving about a guy like that. We shot some of this movie very near his home, so I'd spoken.
Is it Northern California? Is it where?
No, it's San Pedro.
San Pedro, right?
Yeah.
Is Nicholson partly, is the character here, I mean, the notion of the boozing and, you know, I mean, you're drawing on your own life at all in that?
I guess the same way anybody does when they write, you know.
You know the scene?
Yeah, I don't write about stuff I'm not familiar with.
That leads to lots of questions, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess it does. I figure we've been here long enough, I'm safe. You can't go too far.
Tell me where you think it's going for you. I mean, do you see themes, and I mean, where is there an evolution here?
I think so. I mean, I think that in hindsight, when I look at Indian Runner and I look at this, and I start to see where it's all going, but I don't know where it's going to end up. You know, I'm back on a typewriter now, working on something.
You keep saying typewriter. Is it actually a manual or electric typewriter, or is it a word processor?
Electric typewriter, yeah. The word processors and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I guess I doubled my work because I just take the page and give it to somebody who puts it on that. But blackouts or something like that scare me.
If this goes down and you've lost 6 months of work, that could, that could be a problem, couldn't it? That would be suicidal, maybe.
Yeah. Which is what I'm writing about now.
Suicide?
Yeah.
What are you writing about then?
Well, it's not going to be a very glamorous notion at the end of it.
You mean you're going to take somebody to the end?
I'm not sure where it's going to end up yet. I'm still not.
Have you ever been suicidal?
Who knows unless they've done it.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't follow through, certainly.
But you had the thought?
Oh, it struck, it struck me sometime. Or it might have just been a bad mood.
Or was it after coming out of a restaurant and a photographer either made you want to kill him or her, or else go home and commit suicide?
No, only women can make you feel this way.
That opens up a lot, doesn't it?
Well, you know, you got to keep in mind I've spent some time with Jack Nicholson, so I'll always know how to go into the abstract on this stuff.
How does Jack go into the abstract?
Well, he's always got. So yeah, there's a great. I don't know. I'll tell you. You know, a girl came up to him on a disco. Mr. Nicholson, would you like to dance? He said, wrong verb.
So being with Jack is a learning experience.
Oh, yeah, you know how to dodge bullets.
Do you talk to Madonna?
When I run into her.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not a...
No, she's a busy person. I've been pretty busy.
Yeah. And Robin?
Well, we have to talk. We got
because of
kids
children.
together, yeah.
Kids have really changed you, have they?
Yeah, I mean, they have. I guess it's... When I look at my daily life, it changed a lot. It's changed a lot. You know, inside it's just, you know, you do get enriched. You know, it's real clear.
You named him Hopper after Dennis or someone else?
Well,
and Dylan, is that right?
Liking Dennis was part of what wouldn't have prevented me from using the name, but it wasn't really directly so much that. And Dylan it was just names we liked, really. Both of us liked both those names.
What do you do, split the time with them? Or,
yeah.
Because you would travel when Robin was acting and you weren't. You'd travel with her to be and take the kids, too.
Right. Yeah, well, they're both young. They're 2 and 4. So I think they need to see both their parents a lot.
You'll only act, because Dead Man Running is coming out, yeah?
Walking,
Dead Man Walking is coming out when?
December 29th.
And that's you and who else?
Susan Sarandon.
What's the story?
Well, Tim Robbins.
Oh, Tim is directing it.
He adapted the book from a Catholic nun in New Orleans, one of the parishes down there.
This is about, what's it about?
Well, the nun becomes a spiritual advisor to an inmate on death row, and sort of tries to walk him into some kind of redemption before he walks into the execution.
It's a capital punishment thing too, isn't it? And you play the man on death row,
right? And
Susan is the nun, and Tim is not in it; he's just directing.
Right.
Yeah. Who do you really like? I mean, who do you admire when you think of Nicholson and I think of Cassavetes? And I mean, there is a kind of De Niro, I suspect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who do you feel a kinship with?
Well, I guess various people at various times. I certainly feel very close to Jack after this process.
Anybody can say wrong verb. You could feel a kinship with, couldn't you?
But it's, you know, I think there are certain people who it just doesn't get better than. You know, Jack Nicholson, De Niro would certainly be among those people. I think one of the great underrated guys is Don Sutherland. This guy's, you know, he's done so much work. And
the longevity of the career.
It's longevity, but it's also he's had to make very few adjustments to be very different people. You go from Day of the Locust to Ordinary People, or he's just, you know, he's a phenomenon too.
But when you talk about acting with people like Nicholson, I mean, I would think that, I mean, they have, for all the understandable reasons that you don't want to do it, it would seem that that would be, I mean, Nicholson, as you said to me when you sat down, is still fresh. He views it with fresh eyes and a fresh spirit.
Yeah. Well, he's a touched guy, and there's something about
touched with a gift.
Touched with a gift, but touched with an incredible access and courage in his generosity. And I think that, I think what keeps him going is that he's primarily a giver, and so that and that there's not too much subterfuge between that and his whatever kinds of anxieties you have about, is this a totally self-possessed, self-obsessed occupation? I don't think it is for him at all, and so I think that counts for a lot of the longevity of his interest in what he does and his love for what he does.
Are you a giver?
I sure hope so. You know, I think I know that I am not a taker as a writer, as a director.
You are giving there.
Yeah, I feel very freed there that way. I think that acting represents a bit more confusion on that level to me.
When people used to write all that stuff about you, that bad boy stuff and all the fights and all of that kind of stuff, I mean, what was your attitude about it?
Well, at the time, I guess that alcohol played a big part in my attitude about it. Not so much my choices, but there was something valuable about alcohol at that time, because I think that there was, you know, you're pretty young. I mean, I was pretty young when all this was going on, and to be...
It was about 10 years ago when it started, wasn't it?
Yeah, and to be working out notions in your head on camera is a rough go, and I think alcohol prevented a lot of the bad from coming in. So I don't have too much of an attitude about that time. I don't have too many thoughts about it. I think I numbed myself pretty well, and then...
The alcohol did what? It numbed yourself to what you were doing, or to an attitude about the fact that you were doing it?
It kept me, I think, from experiencing things that were really unnatural anyway. I mean, it's an unnatural phenomenon. It's part of it. There is a certain kind of disease in the society having to do with celebrity and all of that stuff. And
it certainly is.
Yeah, and to be at the center of that in that kind of ugly way, I was better off. There wasn't as many good things going to come in that didn't because of the alcohol, as it was important to keep the bad out. And I think that I kept the bad out pretty well with the alcohol, and then just started anew when it was done.
What was the bad? You mean
the bad, I think, is just the cheapening of your spirit, where you just start, where you're forced to pay attention to things that are so unimportant, because you're the center of other people's interest in the unimportant. And so to keep away from that, I think that I drank a little. I got some good poems out of it.
Did you really? Do you have any with you?
No.
Because I can imagine you looking and saying, oh, God, here we go again. You know, I mean, just sort of saying, what the hell wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I do this on the one hand?
Yeah, it's a strange thing. It's also, because I always think in terms of the aspect of it that has to do with that paparazzi stuff and all of that. you know, I always take the camera out of the person's hand and say to someone, you know, just have a person follow you everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go. And at a certain point.
Wherever you are, at every time you go to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Every time you come out of your house.
Yeah. You just want to tell them to leave.
Yeah.
Somehow.
No is not a word they understand.
No, they don't. No is a word that they laugh at. These are mostly people in their late 40s who live with their mothers, have high voices, and get up late.
You've said that before. That's an old line.
Well, it's still true.
It's still true. Is that past for you?
Yeah, it pretty much ended with the divorce. You know,
when Madonna left, it was sort of over?
Yeah, I mean, that was the focus of it, really.
It was her?
Yeah, you know, it was, she represented something that people were very interested in, and so being close to that, you take the flak.
You understand her?
I don't know if I understand anybody. I like her a lot.
You do?
Yeah.
What is it you like about her?
I think she's a very honest person.
And knows who she is and what she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You also believe she could be a good actress, don't you?
I do think so, yeah. Yeah, I think she's in the same trap that a lot of people. Also, there's no doubt but that Bukowski used to say, because there's this idea that everybody is shoved around at one time or another of, you know, everybody suffers. You know, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be the poor black man on the street or this to make it identifiable. And this is true, but he said, you know, no one suffers like the poor. And in the movie business, no one suffers like the women. And there's no doubt about that. They have a much harder road, and it's as lousy as they write for men. They always say, well, we miss out on all the good parts. There are no good parts. They're not missing out on anything, but they're not getting to play the bad ones either. And they have there's this longevity thing having to do with beauty and all of that kind of thing that they're up against. And especially if you're that high profile a person coming into the game, then you're starting right off without any opportunity to fall on your face.
But she seems, well, I mean, I don't know her at all, but she also seems to revel in it and to use it and to...
I think most people would at some time or another, given that same trap. But
yeah, it traps you, so you use it because you know it's there and you know it can advance whatever other goals you might have.
Well, there's areas of safety in what's available that way too. But I do think that she's talented. Yeah, very talented.
And Robin continues to...
I think Robin Wright's one of the finest actresses that we got. Yeah.
Not to speak of, one of them was beautiful.
You know, yeah, well, torture me.
It was painful, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, you have kids with somebody. You don't want to split up. Yeah.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
The Dead Men Walking. Tim Robbins comes out, and then you don't know, you're writing the story that may be made. Whatever you write, you're thinking about a movie, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not writing something that doesn't...
Not right now.
It's
not
just
right now.
a novel or...
No, I'm keeping all that stuff on the side that sometime later when I break a leg or something.
You'll do that then? Yeah. When you first came to New York, you were 19. Mm-hmm. You've been in acting school or something for a couple of years, right? Wanting to be an actor.
Right.
Training to be an actor. You come to New York, what was the first role you got? Pretty soon thereafter.
It's called Heartland.
Heartland. Mm-hmm. And then Taps followed.
Right.
And you'd go back and forth from the West Coast to the East Coast, driving.
Most of the time, yeah.
What would you do?
Oh.
Yes.
Just take a look at the country, I guess.
Yeah.
And I like getting out there in the middle of nowhere in a car, and then you pull into some travel lodge somewhere. And I think at that time I was just beginning to scribble things down and write a little also, and that's one of those kind of classic ideas of, you know, what frees your mind to do that. But I just always liked driving over flying.
Yeah. You still do it?
Yeah.
After Dead Man Walking, you...
Yeah, drove back.
Do you go alone?
Generally speaking, yeah. You know, once in a while you meet somebody somewhere who wants to go to the next city you're on to and give them a ride.
And you just, you know, being the kind of guy you are.
Yeah, you know, heart of gold.
Being a giver.
That's right. That's right.
Being a giver, you say, come along.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you for doing this. Pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.